If they had moved over a little bit, it would have been a three-way with this shark. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my January reading wrap-up, so because you clicked on this video I can assume you want to hear about the books and we can just dive right in. I read 7 this month, starting with Dark August by Katie Tallo. I read this on January 5th, and I was going to read the synopsis straight from Goodreads, but I looked at it and it's like 2 paragraphs long, and I can't be bothered, so I'm going to attempt to summarize myself, and I'll just preface with the fact that it's the tip of the iceberg what I'm sharing with you. There's quite a bit going on in this book. I hope you enjoy the ambiance of the cars going by, because they're being loud today and there's nothing I can do about that. We're following a girl named Gus whose life is pretty bad, but she gets word that her great-grandmother died and that she's inherited everything. This doesn't actually turn out to be that lucrative. What's left of her grandmother's possessions is this dilapidated old house and a similarly dilapidated old dog, neither of which Gus is super psyched about. But while in this house, she does find an old trunk filled with her mom's possessions, and her mom died when she was about 8, so this is, kind of a big deal. And as Gus is going through them, she realizes that there's all these cold case files that she remembers her mom was obsessed with when Gus was a child. And Gus soon realizes that there's actually some current events that are connected to some of these cold case files, and she just kind of takes the plunge and starts investigating, and it leads to all kinds of fun things. And I know I'm not really alluding to any of the actual content of the mystery that Gus is trying to solve, just because I really don't know where to start. So I'm gonna move into my feelings on this book. I absolutely plowed through this book, which is significant for a couple of reasons. This book is nearing 500 pages. Goodreads is gaslighting me and telling me that it was only 448. I know that that is not true. I distinctly remember it being 485 pages. And as somebody that is not a big book person, that was quite the accomplishment. I was very proud of myself, but I can't take a lot of the credit for this because this book is told in a very addictive way, and it seamlessly introduces this massive cast of characters, so you're constantly getting new information, new people, and it's just such an easily consumable book. That was one of my favorite elements about this book, and really one of the reasons why I would say I do recommend this book. What's weird about this book is that a lot of things that I normally care a lot about, I simply didn't in this book, which is good for this book because I didn't really like them that much. The examples of this being that there's quite a few twists in this book, all of which I was very ambivalent towards, leaning more towards had negative opinions on these twists. I felt similarly about the characterization. It's just kind of a meh for me. I'm not mad, but I'm also not impressed, which usually characterization is also quite important to me. And I think the reason why I was able to just kind of overlook those things is because the scale of this story is so impressive. There's quite a few tropes we've seen before, and there's a lot going on that isn't exactly the most memorable, but the beauty of this book is just in the fact that the author just piles it on. There's so many components. It's enjoyable even if some of the bigger elements are just not that exciting to you. So I found this book to be highly enjoyable. I also adored the very last chapter. I thought that was super well done, and this was a 4-star. The next book I read was Before We Go Extinct by Catherynne Rivers. This I finished on January 11th. On the flip side from Dark August, this is a short book and it took me ages to read. This YA contemporary is following a teenage boy named Sharky, and I'll just say it right now. The stranger the protagonist's name, the more likely I am to be irritated with the book. I've noticed this to be a trend, and I should have known. Sharky has been struggling for a while because a couple months before the story takes place, his best friend died, and it's pretty clear to most people it was a suicide, and Sharky is still kind of in denial over this. His mom is kind of at her wit's end with him and just doesn't really feel equipped to help him through this, so she ships him off to stay with his dad for a while, and there Sharky meets a girl who, going off of the synopsis of this book, is supposed to teach him how to live and love again. That's what the synopsis says, but really she's just there to irritate people. And yes, my review of this book very much spilled into my introduction of it, and I apologize for that, but it's time for me to start venting. I really wanted to like this book because I was reading from the author a second time. The previous book that I read from her being The Girl in the Well Is Me, which I gave 3 stars to, but saw so much potential in that I really wanted to see what other books Karen Rivers had, because I thought this could have been like a 5-star read. But unfortunately, disaster struck pretty much right away with this book. I did not buy a single one of the characters. It's been a long time since I've experienced a book where the characters feel so much like characters. Like, I am not exactly asking for a whole lot of realism. I don't need to believe that the people in the book are real, because I know that they're not. But when I can like feel the author's thought process in each character and it doesn't feel well veiled at all, it's going to be a bit of a struggle for me. And I could have overlooked it had they not been so freaking annoying. You already know that I thought the main girl was annoying, so we'll use her to get into our next point. While I'm calling the main girl annoying, let's talk about the misogyny in this book. The discussions around gender were so painfully dated and disappointing. I don't really want to spend forever on this. Just an FYI, if you straighten your hair and start wearing makeup, you're a sellout and you suck. Also, boys are better than girls because they're simple and they don't cause drama. Messages like this are sprinkled in with a heavy hand and they are never really challenged. It just felt like I was wading through a lot of like deeply unproductive misogyny. And that's not exactly a favorite way for me to spend my time. And then on a more serious note, and I will preface this by saying, I do not think there was ill intent in this book at all. I think it was just not really thought through. The friend in this book who dies by suicide is a Black, gay, abused teenager. Our lead is a straight white boy who doesn't come from a great background. His family has always kind of struggled with money. His parents are divorced. There's some things going on, but he is in no way in an abusive household. And I really struggled with how some of these issues were handled. And this is a bit of a spoiler, but we do get a suicide note from this friend, and the main character reads it. And this suicide note was so deeply frustrating to me because the root of this note is basically his friend saying, I have nothing to live for. I'm a bad person. My life is so hard. But you, on the other hand, are wonderful. You're going to make a difference. You're so strong. I could never be like you. I could never do what you're doing. And to top it all off, the main character spends the majority of the book just kind of realizing, I never really liked my friend to begin with. And for me, I just don't really want to read about a child who has suffered through racism and homophobia and just straight up abuse at the hands of his father. His dad was absolutely terrible. Only to end with the message of, but hey, this one kid is great. And that's going to make an excellent segue into my next point. Sharky is the male equivalent of a Mary Sue, and I'm going to go ahead and call him Marcus Stew for just the rest because I can't really stomach calling him Sharky. Everybody just adores this kid, and for absolutely no reason whatsoever. He's not really good at anything. He's not nice to really anyone. And like, I understand that he is grieving. He's traumatized. There's a lot on his plate. But if every single one of the teenagers that he engages with is going to fall in love with him, because they do, they immediately fall in love with him, and not just platonically. All of them romantically love this kid after like 2 interactions with him because he's just that great. If you're gonna go with that angle, I'm gonna need to see a singular positive quality to clue me in as to why. To me, Sharky was just a misogynistic prick, and a lot of that had nothing to do with the grief and the trauma of losing his best friend, because it was all there before that even happened. And I'm aware that I have been railing against this book for quite some time now, but I do have to say, this book does not have very many reviews, and therefore nobody in the reviews mentioned this, and I felt like I was going insane, but I have to share. Sharky falls in love with this girl named Kelby. I've mentioned her. She was obnoxious. And they frequently are at the beach. Now, Sharky's obsessed with sharks, if you couldn't tell from his name. He's quirky like that. That's another reason why everybody likes him, because he's like obsessed with sharks and like wants to save the sharks. Does he actually do anything to save the sharks? No! He just talks about it all the freaking time. Kelby and Sharky have been engaging in some romantic activities over the last couple of days, and they come across a beached shark on one of their walks together. The author goes into great detail to describe how this shark absolutely stinks. It smells awful. It's been on the beach for a couple of days. Also, it clearly met its death through a pod of orcas. And if you don't know, orcas are pretty vicious to pretty much any sea life that's not them. And honestly, they probably are vicious to each other too. So this shark is totally beaten up. It looks awful. It smells awful. This is yuck. It's very yuck. It's sad and yuck and bad. This, of course, is a great opportunity for these characters to, next to a dead, bloated shark corpse. If I'm not being clear enough, they did the deed next to a rotting shark corpse. If they had moved over a little bit, it would have been a 3-way with this shark. Does this really impact my rating? not that much because there's already so many other things that make me not want to give this book a high rating, but literally nobody mentioned this in the reviews, not a single soul. And I feel like if I don't say it out loud, I hallucinated it. And here's the thing, it is not a 1-star book because there's some excellent writing, which made sense because that is a big part of the reason why I picked it up in the first place. I think that this author can write really well. And with the excellent writing that it had, I think this could have been really impactful. But Catherynne Rivers kind of gave us a motif salad. There are so many things that she wants us to believe are important, so many little symbols that she's throwing in right and left. If you're going to lean into a motif, like lean into it, pick a couple, put all of your weight behind those. Don't give me motif salad. I'm gonna go ahead and move on with my life. This was a 2-star book, really did not enjoy it, and I think that my reader-author relationship with Catherynne Rivers is coming to a close. There was a lot of potential for me to really be able to get behind Catherynne Rivers as an author, but I think that potential is gone. Next up, I read Stay Awake by Dan Chaon. Chaon? I read this on January 14th. It is a short story collection that I saw one reviewer categorize as Midwest Gothic, and I just love that description because it fits very, very well. There were some cool concepts in here, and I liked several of the stories. About halfway through reading this collection, I realized that they were set in the same universe and that you can like find some characters that were mentioned in one story in other stories, and I was like, that is so cool. I love that. About 3/4 of the way through, I made a second correct realization that it's not set in the same universe. There's like a parallel universe thing going on. And I will say, there's a lot of really cool Easter eggs in here if you want to do some digging. Like I noticed some of them, I saw the potential for some of them, but at the end of the day, I just wasn't enough in love with this collection to really kind of go back and deep dive with it. Because of the parallel universe situation, a lot of the stories end up feeling very, very similar because they are very similar, like to the point where some characters will have nearly identical experiences and they are their own character, but like they're in a parallel universe. So like you're reading about the same thing again, but just with like a couple of key differences, and it just started to feel a little too repetitive for me. So I didn't really devote a lot of energy to the Easter eggs, but if that sounds interesting to you, I would recommend this book. I gave it 3 stars. I think it's a pretty solid collection, and it was a really good like cleanser before we go extinct. Next up, we have Ways to Hide in Winter by Sarah St. Vincent. This I read on January 20th. This is following a woman named Catherynne who was injured in a car accident several years ago and has since kind of been hiding out in this state park. She has a job there. That makes it sound like she's just like loitering there. No, she has a job. She's just kind of decided she's a little bit done with like society and life. But soon we have a stranger from Uzbekistan who shows up, and it seems like he might be running away from something. This situation kind of forces Catherynne to look back on her life and kind of evaluate it and see how she got to where she's at. I really didn't know what to expect from this book when I picked it up from the library. I didn't know if it was gonna go like the romance route, the thriller route. I wasn't really sure. As you can see from the genre that I put up, it is contemporary. For me, the writing was pretty lackluster. I found myself skimming quite a bit. It's a very short book, and yet I was really struggling to devote my attention to it just because despite being really short, it felt so long with how just kind of bland the writing was at times. There are also a ton of plot elements in this book, so many of which are just blatantly unequal to each other. Because there were so many that just were not that important, they were never fully realized, and it just felt like it was a waste of my time, which once again, this book was short. So you get to the end and you kind of have this feeling of like, why did we go through all of that? What was the point? But at the same time, you can't really say XYZ should have been cut out because then the book is basically nothing. I don't want to get into spoilers, but really there was only one element of this book that I genuinely enjoyed and felt like was well written. The whole thing felt to me like I was given a Lego set and all of the pieces did technically fit together, but there was never like that satisfying snap. Like I could fit them together and I could make a structure, but the whole thing feels very flimsy and I never get like the satisfaction of like, oh, this connects here, this connects here. it just didn't feel like it ever fully came together. And I don't want to be too much of a downer on this one. There were some things in this book that I felt like were really well done. I do think that this author advocates really well for women that have been through abusive relationships. It was handled in a very sensitive yet compelling way, and I thought that was really well done. But I'm still giving this book 2 stars just because as a whole, I wasn't super connected to it, and I don't think it's a fantastic book. Now, the last 3 books I did a vlog for, so you may have heard about these before if you are returning to my channel. The first of which being Comfort Me with Apples by Catherynne M. Valente. Now, I read this on January 24th after recovering from a nasty COVID vaccine-induced fever. This is a teeny tiny novella. It's like 100 pages long, and it's about a couple living in an idyllic gated community, and I can't say anything else because the book is short. Also, I would never want to clue anybody into what this is about, because if you look at the Goodreads page, and I would say don't until you've read the book because there are spoilers abounding, you'll see that there's a lot of reviews of people saying, if I had known what this book was about, I would have never picked it up, and I'm so glad I didn't know what this book was about because I had such a good time. I loved this book. 5 stars, which is very rare for me. I thought it was unique, thoughtfully constructed, beautifully written. I truly have no notes. It did such a good job painting this like beautiful world that like you low-key want to live in, but at the same time kind of implementing this undercurrent of suspense. And so it's like, I know I shouldn't want to live here because there are some messed up things happening and I can tell, but like, man, it sounds so nice. The writing is very lyrical, but at the same time, there are just some like little tidbits of like, ooh, that's gross. And I personally thought it was fantastic. Also, if you like unreliable narrators, but are a little bit burnt out on like the trope of an unreliable narrator where they're always doing the whole like, guess what, I'm lying to you, or like oh, I don't remember this, or I don't remember that. This does have an unreliable narrator, but it's way less obvious and in your face, and I really appreciated that as somebody that does really enjoy unreliable narrators but has seen quite a few of them within the thriller genre. What I've kind of been saying in regards to this book is basically like, I think just about everybody should read it because it's really short, it won't take up any of your time, it's relatively popular at this point, so I think that most people should be able to get their hands on it through a library system. If you're thinking about it, just go for it. Even if you don't like the end result, it's beautifully written and I think you'll have a good time getting there. Now I'm just gonna like very, very briefly do a little spoiler moment. I'll put the tag up all over the screen. No, I'll put it in like the corner. I just very briefly want to talk about the ending and the way it made me feel, because like that last paragraph, and if you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't. I was feeling feral with like the let's go ladies energy. I cannot express how this book somehow shaved off like 5 years of like religiously sanctioned misogyny off of my life. It was beautiful. It was glorious. I don't think I have ever felt such a strong wave of like take down the patriarchy inside my heart before. It was quite a religious experience. So yes, 5 stars. I think everyone should read this book. It's lovely. The next book I read was another 400+ page book. Look at me go. That was Reprieve by James Hahn Matson, which I read on January 26th. It took me quite some time. Now, the marketing of this book, in my opinion, hurt the book quite a bit. As somebody who reads a lot of literary and a lot of horror, I'm going to set the record straight in terms of what I think this book is. Goodreads is going to have this book shelved as horror. I think this book is a literary critique of American culture. It is set against the backdrop of a full contact haunted house, but I would not go into this expecting horror. As a literary novel, I do think this is incredibly consumable. So if you're wanting to like dip your toe into literary novels, I think this is a good place to start, even though I don't love this book. I was really frustrated with kind of the lack of connection to the setting and the way that kind of robbed us of having a meaningful message on the horror genre. Like if you look at the synopsis of this book, if you look at the cover of this book, it is talking about how it's a critique on American culture. Like that's very clear, but it also talks about how it's a critique on the horror genre. I'm looking for it. I don't see it. I don't think that this book said anything meaningful about it. Obviously, different readers are going to pick up on different things, but as somebody that, once again, reads a lot of literary and reads a lot of horror, like this to me didn't say anything that I couldn't have thought up myself, and I honestly felt like some of the messages that they were trying to put forward on the horror genre were both incredibly lazy as well as mildly offensive towards people that do enjoy horror, which is why I think the marketing for this book was so confusing, because like avid horror readers I don't think should read this book. Like they're gonna get to the end and be pissed off, because like spoiler if you don't want to know what like the final kind of message of this book is, they basically just kind of denounce horror completely just because of an event that happened that was really fueled by a lot of other things not connected to the horror genre at all. So basically the horror genre becomes the scapegoat for this thing that didn't have a whole lot to do with it. This book was a disappointment to me. I didn't really like it that much. 3 stars because like I don't think it's necessarily a bad book. I just feel like it took the full contact haunted house idea and just didn't go anywhere with it. And now on to our final book. We have The Violent Season by Sarah Walters, which, hold on, I actually own this one. My little brother got me this for Christmas and I read it on January 29th. This book is following a teenage girl named Wyatt who is living in a town called Wolfridge, and in this town, basically every year the inhabitants start craving violence. Now in the vlog that I did for this, I started out by saying like, I don't know whether this is a YA thriller or a YA horror. I'm gonna kind of have to read the book and end up deciding where it better fits. That was an important distinction for me to make because I hated almost every YA thriller that I read in 2021, and just in general, I don't have a super positive opinion on the genre at this current point in my reading life. But on the flip side, I actually gave very, very high ratings to all of the young adult horror that I read in 2021, to the point where it actually was tied for my highest rated genre of the year. So I was really eager to see where this one would land, and then of course see how it impacted my opinions on either genre and my overall ratings on the genre for 2021 or for 2022. But I have to say, I would categorize this as YA contemporary with a little like sprinkle of violence. There is a love triangle at the center of this story, the reason for that being that this book is about codependent relationships. Like that is the main driving force of this book, is this relationship that Wyatt has with one of the characters. And with that, I have to say, I really like what Sarah Walters is doing. I think there are some great conversations happening in this book. I think there's a lot of really powerful moments. There were some characters in this book that I really liked. And for the most part, I did really enjoy the writing. But where things kind of fell apart for me was that this book embodies a lot of kind of dated young adult tropes, and said tropes kind of trampled my enjoyment at times. The main issue was with the main character, Wyatt. Because we are reading from her perspective, we get to see any and all of her thoughts, and Wyatt frequently hijacks the story to talk about how she is, and these are in her words, cigarettes and cuss words. She is barbed wire and razor blades. I wish I had more for you, but she kind of reuses those ones quite a lot. The cigarettes and cuss words one pissed me off more, so I noticed it more. There's about 10 references to that throughout this book, and man, does it get old. This is only like 250 pages long. With all of that, I ended on a 3-star for this book as well. I would be interested to pick up another book from Sarah Walters. I know she has another book coming out this year in like October. Of course, that release date could kind of move around a little bit, but I will be on the lookout for it. I do think Sarah Walters could be a YA author to watch. I'm not seeing anything in the acknowledgements, but I'm nearly positive that this is her debut. I would like to see her step away from kind of the cutout that we have for a lot of like YA protagonists, because I think there could have been some more original things done with the main character of this book, and I really don't think I can stomach any more of her I am cigarettes and cuss words attitude, because it was painful. But like, I'm ending on a hey, I see what you're doing 3 stars rather than a what were you thinking 3 stars, which is kind of where I'm at with Reprieve a little bit. So by no means was it a total flop with this, and thank you to my little brother Simon for letting me own this book now. I don't have that many books that I own, and it's a paperback, which I love. Paperback supremacy, that's all I'll say on that. And that's going to conclude my January reading wrap up. Looking forward to potentially a better month of reading, because besides the 5-star and the 4-star, the majority of the reads I did feel pretty let down by, so fingers crossed we're moving into some sunnier days. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you have any interest in promoting this video in the eyes of the YouTube gods. It would really help me out, and I will see you again soon with another video.